Hi there, my name is Johanna. I'm a coach and advanced conversational hypnotherapist, and I specialise in perinatal mental health. Today I wanted to discuss the subject of OCD, perinatal OCD, a mother that has compulsions during or after birth, and it can happen to anyone. And some of us will have experienced OCD prior to becoming pregnant or prior to becoming a parent. And for some, OCD tendencies will stay the same during pregnancy. Some people experience an increase in their OCD, a decrease. That's also not uncommon. It may even completely disappear. However, when it does return after pregnancy, especially during those challenging postpartum phases, then it may hit you really unexpectedly. Basically, what it comes down to, it's not one size fits all. There are no rules laid out about OCD and when and who and where it starts or ends. It's unique to each and every individual. What about the person who is a first timer at OCD and it hits them during or after pregnancy at an already very, very busy, for some even life-altering time in your life? You're now faced with compulsions that you never even knew existed. That can be really, really confusing. And the compulsions are often very much connected to worries about the health of your baby. And that may seem natural until at some point they turn into something unnatural. They turn into something obsessive, something compulsive. You're trying to minimize stress levels, and they start throwing a lot of spanners in the works. And OCD can become problematic to not only your health, but also to your baby's health. And especially when you don't understand what's happening, you don't understand what you're going through, where is this coming from and why is it happening to you? They can become a huge part of your mental health in a negative way. Mental health decline lurks around the corner. And consciously, you may be aware of the changes in your behaviour and the changes in how you feel and what you're thinking, but you probably won't be able to stop them. At an unconscious level, you have basically lost all control. So, do you feel out of control? Does it feel like consciously you can come up with so many different reasons why not to act or think or feel in a certain way, but something really deep down inside of you keeps taking a hold of that invisible steering wheel, and it steers you towards certain behaviour or thoughts that seem beyond your control. And for me, as a conversational hypnotherapist, I can help you regain control over your thoughts, which will lead to regaining control over your actions. Your unconscious mind is trying to protect you and to do the best thing possible for you. That's what it's programmed to do the best thing in the best way it knows how to. And since you are basically the programmer of your own mind, you are also the one who can change back or change these thoughts and feelings. You can take charge again. So how to do that? Now, that's the big question. And that's a question that basically also only you can answer, since you are the one who has been creating your mind ever since it was made. Ever since you started growing in your mother's womb. That's where basically every single thought that's stored up here started. The programming has been happening throughout your entire life with each and every thought, each and every feeling that you've had since your brain started to develop. So what age are you now? I turned 43 yesterday, so that's 43 years of developing. That's an awful lot of thoughts and feelings that have gone through my mind over these 43 years. That's a lot of processing going on in a brain. Which also means, and that's a good news, that there are many, many, many resources, so many resources up here. It's a huge, huge pond to fish from. So since you are the one who invented your OCD tendencies yourself with the given resources that were active at that point, then you can make that shift into changing that behaviour yourself also. It does require a bit of help, and I could offer you that help. It can honestly be done, and that's the good news. There's no reprogramming or reframing your brain required. It's just shaking things up a bit and opening some mental brain drawers, if you will, which have plenty of other resources stashed away. You may need a little dig into that grey mass here to help you find these resources, since you can't come up with them at the conscious level yourself. But I promise you, once you find them, that's when you can start using these other resources instead of the ones that you seem to be stuck on just now, that are making you do certain things, making you feel and think things. Because you've unconsciously limited yourself in using only one set of resources. You've sort of gotten stuck. The ones that are making you think and feel and act in a certain compulsive and obsessive way. So please don't hesitate to get in touch if you want me to help you out. It can be done. It's a fairly painless process, and it only requires a couple of conversations. Since I practice conversational hypnotherapy, there's no deep sleep, no snapping fingers, loss of consciousness. There are no scripts required where I tell you what to do. But since I truly understand that, letting go of control is very hard on you, I would like to delve a bit deeper into what OCD is. So, OCD as obsessions are basically unwelcome thoughts or unwelcome images, urges, worries, doubts. And the return, these things seem to repeatedly return in your mind. It feels like you can't really take control of them, or they're controlling you, making you want to control everything around them. So they can make you feel very, very anxious. It can make you feel uncomfortable. They can mess with your mental state of mind to no end. Compulsions are basically repetitive activities that you do to sort of reduce the stress and anxiety caused by that obsession. And it could be something like repeatedly checking that your baby is still breathing, or if you've properly fastened their baby seats, their seat belts in the car, or repeating a thing continuously in your head. As you probably know, since you're watching this video, that is extremely exhausting. It's very time consuming, and the relief that it may give you once you do it is mostly not a lasting one. So the urge to do it again becomes very strong. And by repeating and repeating and repeating it, it becomes stronger and stronger. So especially during pregnancy, which is supposed to be a happy time in your life, that can really trigger these compulsions and obsessions. And in turn, they can become harmful to you and your baby in the long run. Compulsive cleaning, that can become stressful and harmful to your body. Obsessions about food and health can become stressful and dangerous to your health. And what can also happen is intrusive thinking. Intrusive thoughts, they can damage your mental health to no end. And women often become scared of themselves because of these thoughts. Because again, postpartum OCD focuses very much on you and your baby. So these intrusive thoughts will also focus around your young child. Maybe thoughts about harming your child, often sexual thoughts that are perceived as dangerous and harmful to an innocent baby or an innocent child. It's exhaustion, which is a very common theme around childbirth in any case, and stress also, exhaustion and stress due to these thoughts. That becomes a very toxic mix. And very often people are afraid to discuss these thoughts and feelings openly because they are so vivid, and you may be afraid they are perceived as sick, unnatural, unhealthy, especially under the circumstances that you're in, and that you become scared to open up about these thoughts and feelings that you're having in case your partner maybe leaves you. Or if you're not able to open up to a partner, you may be scared to open up to another loved one, to maybe a family member, a friend. So, the most logical people to open up to, it becomes a scary thing. So maybe you can open up to a health provider or a therapist. And very often people are scared to do that, as they are then maybe scared that it will have repercussions, like having your baby taken away from you. Because the thoughts and feelings that you're having are so maybe endangering for your child, about what you'll do to your baby. Because these thoughts are perceived as that no person should ever be having these thoughts about a young child, let alone your own young child. And I know of a couple of clients I had in my practice, they also started to doubt, basically they started to doubt everything in their life at one point when it got really bad. And they started having thoughts like, have I been abused as a child myself? And is that the reason that I'm now having these obscene and vivid thoughts about my own flesh and blood? Which doesn't necessarily have to be true. It can be true, but it doesn't necessarily have to be true. But you can see how these thoughts then start to turn into doubt about absolutely everything that you've ever touched in your life. And that just goes to show how much of an impact your thoughts can have on every aspect of your life. Mental health can go into a steep decline because of intrusive thoughts. And what's really terrible about it is that, people tend to shut down. They stop talking about it without even realizing that this is a part of their OCD tendencies. It's not you being a terrible person. It's a form of obsessive thinking that has spiraled out of control. And that does not, and I want to reiterate this does not define you as a person. I remember listening to a podcast and a lady who experienced extreme perinatal OCD, her gynecologist referred her to a psychologist after picking up on some of the signs and signals of mental health decline during her pregnancy. And the psychologist that she was appointed to, he or she, I'm not sure if it was a he or she, didn't educate her on what POCD can entail. It was just a very small part of it that was diagnosed and treated. So only once during a conversation with her psychologist intrusive thoughts were mentioned, she didn't feel that she was able to open up about it to her psychologist because it wasn't referred to as something that belonged to her OCD tendencies. And she received help, but the help that she received wasn't adequate because the things that she didn't dare discuss anymore, they weren't treated. And at the time, she didn't realise that having intrusive thoughts was a symptom of OCD, and she wasn't told by this psychologist. And this lady honestly thought that OCD had everything to do with obsessive cleaning and being extremely vigilant. And that was part of her problem, and that part was treated. But the intrusive thoughts that were the worst part, they weren't. Her psychologist hadn't picked up on these things because the psychologist sort of shut her down about that subject. And in this case, a therapeutic intervention, it was unsuccessful because part of it was sort of solved, but the biggest chunk of it was sort of shoved under the carpet because it wasn't mentioned in a proper way, and it was sort of denied that it was part of OCD. So some of you listening to this video, you will have experienced or maybe educated yourself on perinatal OCD and what the signs and symptoms are. But not everyone is aware of exactly what perinatal OCD is. And that's why I'd like to I'll try and come up with a list of things that you may experience when suffering from perinatal OCD. And it does slightly differ from the regular OCD. And I urge you to share this list with loved ones too, so they can have a better understanding and they can recognize what's happening to you. And please note here, we are all unique individuals. So some of you will recognize all of the symptoms to an extent, and some of you may only recognize one or two. And someone out there, once upon a time, decided to label it as OCD. But labeling someone isn't what's going to solve it per se. Having a label, it can help for some, and it can help go towards a certain treatment, but it doesn't mean that the solutions that come with that label are solutions that will help you in your unique case. And again, I can't stress enough, you are a unique individual, so am I. Everyone is unique, and every form of therapy should look at your unique story and your unique needs. Only then will therapy have a good chance of actually working and for you to be able to turn your life around. So, to get back to the symptoms that you may or may not experience, but it's important to know where to start looking for help. So, what are common signs and symptoms of perinatal OCD sufferers? Now, I mentioned that already, intrusive thoughts that have to do with your baby. They're so-called intrusive for a reason, because they are horrible thoughts. Maybe drowning your child. It can be about sexual abuse, inappropriately touching them, hurting them, seeing them in an accident, burying them. They are really vivid and horrible, and they can occur during or after pregnancy, or both. You can experience a very deep fear of being responsible for giving a child a serious disease, maybe, or giving them the wrong food, or too hot or too cold, a bottle that's too hot, or maybe them choking because you didn't cut up the food properly. That can also be part of intrusive thoughts. It's a huge fear of carrying that responsibility for your child. Once that starts to become so big that you start to scare away from things, then that could be called OCD, perinatal OCD. Or you fear maybe making the wrong decision for them, for example, about their routines, or about bringing them to childcare, or maybe vaccinations or medical treatment. And these obsessive thoughts can lead to compulsions, like doing things repetitively and excessively. For example, washing bottles, or washing their clothes or their toys, or cleaning your house to an extreme, not taking them out of the house, or taking a very, very long time to leave the house because you have to double, triple check everything. You may even start avoiding things altogether because it becomes too exhausting to leave the house. There's no more spontaneous things happening in your life because everything becomes huge. Leaving the house becomes a no-go because you're scared of maybe contamination. And the next step up from this could be social isolation because you never see anyone anymore. And that in itself can start messing with your mental health to an even bigger extent. Your intrusive thoughts could push you into things like, again, it doesn't have to do with cleaning per se, but it could even push you into avoiding bathing your baby, or changing their dirty nappies because you don't trust yourself when acting upon these intrusive thoughts that you're having about your naked baby. Constantly checking if your baby is still alive by waking them up. That can seriously mess with their sleeping routines. And I think many mums do this to an extent, but when it becomes compulsive, you may be putting your health at risk as well as your baby's. Babies need their sleep to develop their wee bodies properly, and it also messes with your sleeping patterns, and sleep deprivation is another mental health issue now thrown into this mix, which can exacerbate your struggles. So another thing that can happen is to be constantly looking at signs in your baby that they have been hurt by someone. once you start bringing them to childcare maybe, or when you have a babysitter. And that in turn can cause trust issues. And that can go as far as turning into paranoia. Not to mention, again, that social isolation that can happen, or relationship issues in your own household with your partner. So continuously asking for reassurance that you've been doing things correctly around your baby. That can also happen, that you're continuously checking online if you're, whatever's happening to your baby, if that's according to what should happen, or if something is going badly wrong. Going over things 20 times to make sure that you've done it. And even if you've done one thing maybe slightly wrong, you think you've done something or not done something, you'll start the process all over again. Making, really small tasks, like for example, sterilizing your baby's bottle, a task that can take up hours instead of just minutes. And that's time that you could be spending with your baby and on yourself. And these obsessions and these compulsions, they can leave you feeling lots of intense feelings, lots of intense emotions that you probably weren't expecting to feel, that you're about to become or have just become a parent. And instead of making it a happy experience, you are probably feeling anxiety and exhaustion during an already exhausting and overwhelming time in your life. You may experience guilt towards your partner and towards your baby or towards your other children. It can even go as far as becoming depressed. Life with a baby doesn't feel like a very happy life this way. It feels like a genuinely hard life because there are so many extra tasks that you're making yourself do. And what are you most likely doing? You may be feeling like crap all the time. And what will happen then is, for some relief, what will you do? You will start to repeat the compulsions again, as these compulsions give you temporary relief and satisfaction. You may not have considered that, so I know that sounds awful, but that is what OCD sufferers do. Why? Well, repeating these things, like washing up bottles again and again and again, just in case you miss something, or throwing out all the meals that you cooked in case they are contaminated and starting all over again, or checking your baby's breathing again and again. I don't need to go on with this, I think you get the gist of it. But all of these things, by doing that again, it gives you temporary relief. You give yourself temporary satisfaction in a weird, twisted way, because doing it again means that you have another chance of getting it right this time, or of you keeping yourself and your wee one out of danger. You're keeping yourself safe. It's like you have these mental rituals to try to cancel out negative thoughts, but they don't seem to want to stay away. Unfortunately, that relief is very temporary, and the compulsions and obsessions come back, causing that whole cycle to start again. Your unconscious wants to do that cycle again and again because it gives you a false sense of safeness. It becomes an automatic program that your brain puts on repeat. So consciously, you're probably aware that it's not a healthy program that you're stuck on, but unconsciously, that program is becoming more and more embedded, and it will become harder to break that automatic cycle. And I have to mention here that the unconscious part of our brain, which is the biggest and the toughest and the most dominant part, it loves repetition, especially when that repetition gives you a temporary relieved feeling straight away. That's immediate award. Our brain is lazy, and it loves these quick, easy patterns with quick rewards. And that is why it's often easier to become stuck in bad patterns than it is to become unstuck of them. OCD or not, this is the way it works for most of us. So you can imagine that for OCD sufferers, it really sucks that our brains are wired that way, because it makes life really, really hard. And there are ways to become unstuck, and they are surprisingly easy. During my coaching and my hypnotherapy session, I focus on the unconscious part. And basically all it takes is a conversation. It doesn't take deep sleep, walking down a beach, going deeper and deeper. That's the classical form of hypnosis, which I do not apply, because I feel that the classical form of hypnosis is more of a relaxing thing, but it's not something that will genuinely, in the long term, change anything up here. So what I do is during a conversation, I focus on how you communicate at an unconscious level. And that is where you will find your own personal, unique, individual answers to why you are stuck, and also how to become unstuck of these compulsive loops that you're stuck in. And it often doesn't require more than 1 or 2 sessions. And it's a really fast and also a very sustainable way to get rid of your struggles. And I'd love to help you on this journey. So basically, to summarize perinatal OCD, their obsessions and compulsions during the perinatal period focused mostly on your baby and on being a parent. They are different for each and every individual, but they are always focused around your pregnancy and your baby, and that's where they significantly, where there's significant difference between not normal, but OCD and perinatal OCD. And it's extremely important to know. But how do you know it to such an extent, and how do you believe it to the extent that you can now let all these thoughts go and stop believing them? How to flip that switch so that you can be relieved of these OCD tendencies. Now, I keep saying intrusive thoughts, and the word intrusive stems from intrusion or intruder. And the definition of intruder is it's a person who is not welcome or wanted in a place. And in this case, it's not a person, it's a thought that is not welcome in your head, but it is there and it seems to be stuck. And because it's unwelcome, you will try to push it away. That's a logical knee-jerk reaction to something you don't want there. And these thoughts, they can leave you feeling horrible and absolutely disgusted about yourself. So again, logically, you will want to get rid of them. You want to push them away, make them go away and make up for what you've been thinking to whoever you were thinking these thoughts about. And in this case, again, that will most likely be your child, your baby. And you may want to make it right by not doing certain things with them anymore, so that there's no chance of you acting on these thoughts. I think I already gave an example of not cleaning their nappies, so you don't have to change or touch them inappropriately, or maybe not bathe them, so you aren't in the opportunity of maybe drowning them. And it's so super, super important to understand here that this is you attempting to take away some of these fears. That's you trying to protect your baby by not doing something, by not bathing them, not changing their nappies. You may feel messed up and inappropriate, but at the same time, you are so sensible to try to put a certain distance or a certain behaviour in place to protect your wee one, to not act on the compulsion. And often you're so busy trying to force yourself to get rid of these compulsions that you may not even consider the fact that this is part of perinatal OCD. OCD, especially during or after a pregnancy, can ruin that experience, and it can really seriously mess with your mental health at a time when you should be able to focus on yourself and your new family. But it's really, really important to know that there's also a part of you that can really trust on the fact that you're not acting on these compulsions, because you are able to think of a barrier to put in between them to not act on them. And that's also something that we overlook. And that's something where our trust can start to hopefully return. It's just a really, really horrible thing to go through. So, please reach out if you feel that I can help you. And for now, I would like to leave you with one simple question. You know, thinking back of listening to this video, what have you learned about yourself after listening to this video? That's an important question. Try to get that unconscious brain to think about it. And try to answer it honestly, of course. And try to look at the positive side in there. Again, please reach out if you feel that I can help you. Take care.